Hello, Rachel.
Hi, Ryan.
How are you doing?
Okay.
Just okay. I feel like you're
okay.
often just okay or fine when we're talking on the podcast these days. Why are you feeling just okay?
I didn't really care for this episode. It did not stay in my brain. It has left me feeling rather empty and maybe slightly annoyed.
That's right, everyone. This is Yum Yum Podcast. This is our coverage of Discovery's final season. This is the series that made us start podcasting together in the first place. We were watching Discovery when it was coming out, and it was just so confounding, so thought-provoking, so evocative that it made us want to do a rewatch and record our thoughts along the way. And now Discovery has come to a close. We better catch up, do our rewatch, and talk about the thing itself. Yum Yum was a line of dialogue from this series. We love that line of dialogue. If you're here, you know what it is. You've watched Discovery, and Commander Nandi said that line breathlessly, sexily, flicking her hair back and licking those lips. She will be back soon, don't you worry. They do get Nan in the final season. Oh, and what a character she gets to be in this final season. But Rachel, what episode of Star Trek Discovery are we talking about today?
We're talking about mirrors. Because, get it? Captain Burnham and Book journey into extra-dimensional space in search of the next clue to the location of the progenitor's power, while Rayner navigates his first mission in command of the USS Discovery, and Culber opens up to Tilly.
What an amazing episode. This is halfway through the season now, episode 5 of season 5. And before we launch off into the Yum Yum moment, I have a quick question to ask you here. We actually talked about this a little bit during our reaction to the episode because we have been filming our reactions and putting them on the Patreon. So people, if you want to see those, head on over to Yum Yum Podcast on Patreon. You get access to those as well as these episodes early and a whole back catalogue of goodies. But I want to ask you, how does it feel to be 50% of the way through the final lot of Star Trek Discovery?
Good and bad, because I am glad to have half of it done. I am not glad that we have half to get through.
Nothing more than just a pithy statement, Rachel?
Nope.
Really?
I really don't feel like I have much to offer.
What? But Rachel, this is the thing that made us us. This is Yum Yum, for Christ's sake. We're the Yum Yum Podcast. We're the only podcast brave enough to rewatch Star Trek Discovery. No human on Earth has ever done it and live to tell the tale. Some say that we are
you make
husks.
me suffer through it. I was talking with somebody, and they were like, "Wait, why would you do that to yourselves?" And I was just like, well, Ryan locked us in to do a podcast about it. And they were like, but why have you done it for seasons? And I was like, well, we weren't going to do the 5th one, and then they made it the last one, and Ryan wanted to finish it.
Oh, come on, you wanted to as well. We're both completionists, and you know why we do this. It's for catharsis. There is something fun to be had about dissecting and picking our way through Discovery, looking at the bits of it that work and don't work for us. Now, what do we do next, Rachel? What is there to sink our teeth into?
Well, we ask, what is the Yum Yum moment of this episode? And I am at a loss. because, like, this whole episode is just boring. Like, just so drab. And I guess, it's hard to pick a line because there's like sexiness and weirdness when it comes to the Locke, Mole and Locke flashbacks, right?
Their courtship and flirtations.
But that's like, that is just like a bunch of decisions, not a singular line or a singular
Moment.
moment.
Because it doesn't just have to be a line, it could be an absurd choice. I know what it is. I know the correct answer, and the fact that you are struggling to find it is absolutely shocking to me.
Because I feel like there was something that I was just like, wait, what the fuck did they do that for? And the only one that, like, I'm recalling right now is when Book was just like, well, he was a great mentor to me.
In regards to the
Cleveland
original
Booker.
The correct answer is how we open the episode itself, with Cleveland Booker sitting by himself.
Yeah, but I didn't think that we could do a physical, like, just
moments. We've done this. We've done silly.
Just the way that his fingers are. I didn't think that was enough.
It is plenty, but
and like, I also was like, I don't feel like I can pick that because we just made fun of it so much that it
during
made it
our reaction,
fun.
It was very funny. Book is sitting there musing on the world. He's grim dark mode, and he has his hands clasped and his index fingers
nearby. We gotta know that.
The Queen Grudge makes an appearance in this episode, a very, very sparse appearance from the cat in this season,
and
actually.
A very real purr from that cat.
Oh, so real,
live.
real. But if we want to be super specific and not just have the actor was directed to awkwardly have his pointing fingers up his nostrils, I do have to say the lines of dialogue that Rayner has when he's trying to implement like his race's cultural touchstones, and the boiling the cake bits really was the golden
also
achievement.
Boil certain cakes.
Don't knock it till you try it.
Like, there is such a thing as boiled cakes already on Earth. I am fairly sure of.
Rachel, I'm not a baker or a boiler in this case, so I cannot comment with the assuredness that you can.
I don't need to know how the cake is boiled, Commander.
Kill and boil their cakes?
Don't knock it till you try it.
I did not enjoy this episode. This episode thinks that it is thematic, and it's just vacuous. They have all of these layers of symbolism that they are exploring with Michael and Book, Mole and Locke, and the mirror universe. And it means nothing to me. And it does not feel any more significant on a rewatch. It feels less significant and less interesting because it's just like they don't do shit with this, really.
Shit with what exactly would you say?
The
because you're saying
comparisons between Mole and Locke and Book and Michael, and the influence that seeing Mole and Locke and their relationship has on Michael and Book's romantic relationship.
The one they used to have.
Yeah. which we thought ended last season.
I mean, it ended at the start of this season too.
But
Well, it's never really over because they're the real deal.
They're fated.
We've seen TV before. You know that they're going to end up together. We're just going to have to do the will they, won't they for a time. I thought this episode, on initial watch through, was completely average. Just bare bones, nothing to it.
Before you fully dive in, I want to say one more thing, which I think we both agree on, which is this particular step in the scavenger hunt felt the most useless.
Oh, so far, yeah, completely. Now on the rewatch, I don't know exactly what it is, but I got really angry with this episode. I got really annoyed. I got frustrated. I found it just so... just made my brain fritz out because what I can pinpoint in this second that really got to me is it has laid out through all of the episode so many plots and so many potentials for what this story could be, what this episode could be talking about and could be exploring, and it doesn't really benefit any of them. It doesn't really explore any of them. It doesn't really choose any of them. So it is just a jumbled mess. What about it do you think has that sensation to it?
The flashbacks are really like a key part of that, right? Because it goes, oh wait, we're not even staying in the here and now. Let's go back a bit to where it all started. A love story for the ages.
But not really. I don't mind the potential episode premise of the good guys and the bad guys are not so different, and they are locked into a situation in which they must work together and they learn more about each other. Or I don't mind an episode in which we take a pause, have a flashback, or give some insight into characters, whether they be the protagonist or antagonist. One of our favorite episodes from season 4 was that for Taka, who was our favorite antagonist of Discovery. So why do these tricks not work in this particular episode? And it's because they're using too many of them at the same time that it becomes severely underwritten. Go to those flashbacks. All of their lines of dialogue are just exposition, exposition, exposition. There's not one natural word spoken between the two because they're not afforded the time to do that. So they have to, within the very limited amount of scenes, get the information across to the audience. And that's all it is. And that's what this episode really has going on throughout it, is they are just hammering in very clumsily but heavily the points. So we can't say that this episode didn't have anything to say. It's that it had so many things to say, but didn't really have a comprehensive sentence about any of them.
No, it very much is more like, hey, look at this shiny thing. You want to know what the shiny thing means? Because why? Why would they have a thematic statement when they can just have ideas? Why really say anything about those ideas? Why say anything about the characters? Why use the characters to say something about those ideas? We have this new character, Mo.
Mm-hmm.
We have repeatedly been told that Book is an asset because he has an in with her, because he knew her dad. We have been told that. We've been told that that's part of Michael's justification for why it just needs to be her and Book on this fucking mission.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? we get a tragic backstory of, my daddy abandoned me and then my mum had to go work in a mine and then she died.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have the idea of family connection, lost connection, loss, grief,
Failed dreams,
childhood.
abandonment, yeah.
What is Discovery saying about any of those things, Ryan?
Oh, that they exist. That's it.
Okay.
That's as deep as it gets. They exist and they cause emotions, positive and or negative. And that's the thing, is they are raising these ideas up. They're putting them up. They're saying, look, we mentioned it. That's enough. We mentioned it. That's all themes are. You just mention it. No, you need to examine, you need to deepen, you need to lay down the foundation and then the groundwork and then the building blocks of what your overall point is. Like, what is the point to all of that stuff you said about Mole that we didn't already know from the previous episodes? Like, other than how Locke and Mole met and why they're on the run, what did you learn?
She was a career first.
Yeah. What did you actually learn about her character that wasn't just information, like just exposition, like, yeah, she had a mum that died, but like, what did you actually come to terms with her character that you didn't already do in the previous episodes?
She used to have longer hair.
Superficial.
Yep.
Superficial, and you're being a silly bugger, but...
No, but genuinely, that is the first thing that came to mind, is that, like I said, she was a career first, and then he joined her in that profession, not that they both were couriers, and then they got together, right? That bit was new. Yeah? That she has had this hairstyle and color and sort of self-expression is, but her hair used to be longer.
Did she cut it because they're on the run? Ooh.
Yeah. Because we see her childhood photo, it's not like her hair is naturally like that. That's a
choice.
Yes, and a choice that she's been making consistently for years, apparently. And it could be argued that using flashbacks means that we're being shown, not told.
No, we're just cutting back to being told.
Yes, we are.
I know what it's like to be on the outside, alone. Makes you hungry. Also, makes you smart.
I'm going to be boring for a moment. Take a note from this episode. Page out of this book.
Oh, his name's Book. I get it. Wow.
In this past week, I have, over the course of the week, spent at least an hour of my life explaining a specific rubric to two separate classes. You know what a rubric is, Ryan?
I do, but explain it for the people who aren't in the field of education.
Yeah. Or, didn't pay attention to any rubric that they were ever marked on, because almost guaranteed that you were at some stage marked against a rubric. So, rubric is a table that gives the information about what you're being assessed on and what the different levels of achievement are for a specific task. And for this specific task, the students have to talk in their writing, ideally analyzing ideas, themes, and symbols. And the most basic, so like the 1 out of 5 is them just identifying an idea, theme, or symbol. But that is the level that this episode of Star Trek Discovery is at. It is simply identifying. It is not saying anything of depth. It's not saying anything about that idea. It's not saying in this context with these characters, this means this. Or extrapolating out either. It's just presenting and going, idea. And it's nothing of substance. But the spectacle of the show treats it like there is something there. So that is a part of what makes it feel so vacuous and empty to me, is because all of these things are being like, ooh, we're doing something here. And it's like, but you're not actually saying anything. You're not actually doing
You're talking a lot, but you're not saying anything
about it. And like I feel like I'm just going around in a loop because there's just no insight into anything that we are given in this episode.
It's surface
we aren't
level.
given any insight really into the characters, and we aren't given any insight into the world, and we're not given any insight into the ideas that they are just labeling, identifying,
Cataloging, checking off a list.
and moving on. But with this episode, more than the previous ones in this season in particular, right, feels like it wants to be doing something because they've got these blocks set up. Like they're playing with the literal mirror universe. They're tapping into existing lore between TOS with Spock and Discovery's past with Saru.
And
Saru in the mirror.
Yeah, in the mirror. Yes.
But it is just being like, hey, that's a thing. And then you get it to the end of the episode and Michael's like, you know what? It happened.
I think there's also
hope.
Yeah, I think
they had hope and it worked out. It's like,
yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that hope is all you need, or that hope is always rewarded? Because we've seen that not be true the majority of the time
in Discovery.
And
no,
Burnham,
they always say that hope is possible, that hope is within yourself, that even in the darkest of times there is a bright light, that hope is you, and that hope is myself. They do have this kind of optimistic streak. I won't deny them that, even if it's insincere. Something that you've just touched on there too that makes me wonder this is, if this was about other characters, would we like it more? Because we don't like Michael Burnham that much as a character. I'll say, I don't even hate Michael as a character. I just don't care about Michael as a character. And Book is an extension of Michael. I find him charming. I think the actor is very handsome and charismatic and has great presence. But with Maul and Locke, there's something else just with everything you said too, there's this thing that's a big void in the center of it which is you can't play the compare and contrast game when we don't have a point of reference, because we never got to know what Michael and Book were like as couriers. We never got to know that. They just keep saying these little stories, but it's not a substitution. We've always rubbed up against that. So this episode really falls on its face for those two big reasons of like, all of this stuff is empty, but in part because we don't really like the characters being examined, but two, we don't have a frame of reference for the compare and contrast.
No. It's just like, hey, they're couriers. They used to be couriers.
That's- Mirrors. Very clever.
Well, look
title.
at what we did.
I always struggle with modern Star Trek's writing like this because they have ideas, but it's like they're not interested in
Adira
them.
having guilt about the time bug. Like,
Now, is it just about the
that's
time
just
bug, or is it?
thrown in there, and it's
Yeah.
just like, okay, you gonna do anything with that? Nah.
No,
Like,
they're not.
Shit just doesn't matter.
In a more polished show, that would be a bigger deal, and the guilt wouldn't actually be about how they let a time bug on, but because they're actually feeling guilty about how their relationship didn't work out. So that way, that story still has a ripple effect and not just it got shut off like a pipe. Like, that's something you do. And I always just come to this breaking point with a lot of modern Star Trek, which is, are they lazy, incompetent, or dispassionate about their own ideas? Because they discard them, rinse through them, recycle them, trash them, and just catalog and checklist off of them. And I personally don't, as a viewer, understand why they just go through the motions like that since the very beginning, with different series as well, to varying degrees, but it's been a constant thing. Like, this episode has like 14 subplots in it, like Adira, like Raina, like the crew, like Tilly, like Hugh, and
Tilly's
none of
good
them.
in a crisis, don't you know?
But why do they bring it up unless they?
Tilly's following a power conduit and encountering people's pets. What type of vole was it?
Cardassian vole, of course. But we have often had this conversation, but when an episode like this hits you in the face and it's so at the forefront, where do you land? Like, why does the writing many times over in modern Star Trek do this?
I am struggling to think of a more complicated answer other than it's bad writing. And because they aren't trying to create and market a show that does that. It is reactionary to that and pays lip service to that. But I feel like the higher ups direct the writers and select writers that don't do that, can't do that, and they're willing not to. They're willing to just do the lip service.
It's a job. It's a job.
It's a product.
It's a product. It's content. And I do not want to poo-poo the credibility of the actual writers because we don't know. Maybe these people go on to do some great stuff. We can't always judge everyone by this.
Choice.
But I can't help
in a lot of ways, like
because there's a system that forces them to work like this.
It's a corporate job.
We know from covering Babylon 5 how J. Michael Straczynski would leave jobs like this because he couldn't handle being compressed and confined in this type of machinery.
And being told what to do and not being able to listen to what the characters.
The voice of the show itself, of the material. But it does feel like there is this overall sense of dispassion for creating, and not even just like Star Trek. I will believe that many of the people who write on this show are Trekkies. I can believe that. I can believe that they know Star Trek. I can believe that too. But you don't see it on the screen enough. And what you see on the screen is someone having to hand in their work on time. That's it. That's it. That's what I come to with an episode like this. So all of these things that get rushed over, it's because on paper, it meets the standard. It meets what you need for this type of series. It's a sci-fi action adventure show with a mystery. That's this episode. It's a sci-fi action adventure show with a mystery. And that's all there is. So if we can go through like the plots, it's like Adira has guilt and doubt. That's one scene. But we spent time on it. It gave...
Tilly's in multiple scenes.
Tilly...
Her shit.
Tilly's in multiple scenes, but what is their story or what do they contribute? What do they do?
She transports to the bridge for no reason.
Don't tell me, like, literally what happens. Tell me, like, on a meaningful level, what do you get from Tilly in this episode?
Nothing.
Yeah, I'm helping Adira and Paul. We're trying to boost the signal by pulling power from the EPS grid. And I followed this conduit for 3 decks, including the quarters of a new ensign who's very nice, but keeps a Cardassian vole as a pet. Anyhow.
I don't care about any of these bridge crew people, and I never have, and I never will, because they're nothing people. And when we give them more time, it's like we're giving more time to static noise. Because I would rather them give more to the actual main characters in the series, which often compete against each other for time. Because there's so many of the cast members in this series that are vying for screen time and yet don't get it. And when they do get it, it doesn't feel very rewarding. So when we have a scene like this, it should, in an ideal world, alleviate my frustration. Like, okay, we're showing that the bridge crew all are individuals with backgrounds, and expertise, and interests. But, to be true, I found this scene to not only be eye-rolling, but cringe-inducing. I find it very corny.
Yeah. Because once again, there is a complete lack of substance. There's nothing for me to add to it. Because to me, there's nothing to discuss here. It is a scene that happens. It moves the plot forward. No insight about characters is given. No insight about the world is given. No insight about the themes are given.
Reese is given something. More just like, hey, this character matters in the season. Like, that's it. Because they've been giving moments of heroicism and insight to Reese, but I couldn't tell you what his solution was in this episode because it was just a bunch of technobabble garbage. I don't care. Like, yeah, they managed to drag the Enterprise through a wormhole. Okay, like, great, that's cool, but it wasn't particularly striking or memorable, and it's not like he had a unique expertise or point of view that made it memorable. I always come back to Reg Barkley, where Reg Barkley, he had an interesting point of view, especially when it came to holograms and the computer, because he had an introverted and obsessive-compulsive personality, and they tied it together with those things. So when we get to a point that he is the reason that the Voyager can contact home again, it adds up because that's his personality. He would be the guy that becomes fixated on that, even though he's a character that's had less screen time than Reese. He's unique in the fact that we've known him the longest out of the bridge crew, and he's survived. Like,
Yeah.
He's the only one that stayed there. That's it.
Detmer and Owo got other jobs last episode, so they're going.
Oh, we'll talk about it now since you mentioned them. Bye-bye, Detmer, Owo, bye-bye. Unceremoniously taken out of the show, too. They're just driving the Enterprise back to base.
Because it can't go warp, it just goes a little whoosh.
What was that? It goes what, sorry?
It goes a whoosh.
A whooshikan
Yeah.
is right there.
Mm-hmm.
But-
I teed you up.
You teed me up, but I say all of this about the bridge crew, but Owo and Detmer were the faces. They were the two
They
main
were in
ones
the
that we gave them
foreground
to.
of the bridge
They were
shots.
literally in the foreground, but we also gave them backstories. We gave them plots. We gave them characterization. And this is what comes to bear. They off screen just leave the show because those actors got jobs elsewhere because they weren't utilized in this series enough.
I don't have anything to add because I don't really feel anything about it. I am just like, good on them. Hopefully, they got more to do in whatever other jobs they got. Because they were getting a steady paycheck here, but not a lot of, acting happening.
There's a lot of acting happening from Raina. Let's get a Raina check-in.
He doesn't sit in the chair, Ryan. He almost does. He strokes it. He looks at it longingly, but he doesn't sit there.
You know it's serious because Rachel's whispering. And that means that this really affected her. Let's get a Raina check-in. How do you feel about Raina? This is a character that pretty much every guest we've had has said was the shining thing of the season, but you haven't been quite on the same page as everyone else when it comes to Raina. So how are you with him, and what did they do with him in the episode?
He's there. He doesn't want Michael to go on the away mission. They have a chat in the ready room, and then Michael does whatever she wants, because that's what Michael does.
But he's given command.
Yep, he's given command, and instead of it being like, oh yeah, you are right, it is a little bit risky for me to, go away on the away mission. Hey, it's okay. You can be in charge, buddy. It's fine. It's fine for you to take the con. It's okay.
You can
It's
take
okay.
you can
You
take
can
the chair.
handle it, buddy. You can handle it. You can handle being captain just for a little bit while I'm away.
Who would have guessed the guy
I don't
who's
know
been a
why I went
captain
with
like
an
3
accent
times
for that.
longer than her could be okay being a captain? Like that's the funny part, because you would think that it would be a two-way street. Like Michael maybe learns a little bit and he learns a little bit, but it's more one-sided. They have their camaraderie. They learn about each other's cultures. That's been a running thread throughout the season, and that will come.
It's part of what saves her.
It's a part of what saves her is using her skills as a xenoanthropologist and making sure to let him know that she's been actively pursuing that. So when she sends the Morse code message later, he understands it and then they can save them. I like that. Like, there are things to this relationship I do enjoy that isn't as simple as Michael is right and Raina is wrong. It doesn't go neatly into that box, and I think it's all the better for it. Raina, to me, stands out not only because he has a swagger to him as a performer, but because he is a character that has something to say. But what do you feel about Raina as a character?
I'm just a bit like, okay. You know, we had the rotating captain's chair for the first couple of seasons, and now we have a rotating second.
First officer, yeah?
Yeah.
But is that all? Like, you're thinking more about the meta of the show, but is there anything about this individual that you have any opinions on or feelings towards?
I get frustrated that all of the characters is just whatever the writers need him to be, right? They need him to be insecure about taking command in this episode. So that's what he is. like, we've seen that he kind of is broken down after his failure and almost causing the destruction of a large civilization on an underdeveloped planet.
Mm-hmm.
But not to the extent where I feel like it makes sense that it's shook him enough for him to be like, I don't want to be in charge.
No, and especially because their dynamic throughout the series was he thinks he knows best. And it's about how he doesn't know best. And I could see the argument being made, like, now he's learned that lesson, he feels less confident in his ability to lead on his own. But I understand where you're coming from in terms of, like, that insecurity feels like it's tokenistic for the needs of this episode and this plot. So they find the clue that led them to this location last episode before the time bug got there. Somehow, they had some line, like, again, you can't fault the show. They said a thing to explain away, but they say it in such a way where you don't really retain the information of they found a thingamajig to show us that it's a wormhole. Like, I understand that they could read the warp trails of Mole and Locke, but then they have this thing where it's like, and then we determine this and this and that, and now look, there's a wormhole. And I say, how did you figure that out?
Convenient.
Yeah, I go, wait, how did you figure that out? But more importantly, how did Mole and Locke figure that out? I would love to know how they figured out the wormhole thing and how they figured out to get in there. Now, admittedly, their ship did get fucked up, so that's one of the downsides for them just rushing in, I guess.
How long were they in there for?
Great question. The time bug
Did
took
they
them out for a
turn
little
up
while.
no, like, it was 6 hours. I'm pretty sure they said they lost 6 hours. So Mole and Locke, did they take a little while to figure it out, or did they immediately figure it out? Did they figure it out faster than Discovery?
They had to figure it out long enough for them to get into the wormhole, escape the dying ship with hollow emitters that they could then plant all over the sick bay. Oh, they also had to know where to look for the MacGuffin of the week. Go there, install the hollow emitters, and then get ready for a standoff.
And they seem to have done it in a different way, potentially, because, like, Michael searches for the quantum signatures, but they seem confused at her indication to search for that.
I think it's more confused that she has what is a lure for another quantum signature. But again, if they were there before, they would know there's only one thing that matches the signature that isn't themselves. So,
Yeah, so
Michael doing that wouldn't, I don't know, maybe does.
The redirect wouldn't work if they had
tracked it the same way Michael and Book are.
Yeah.
But again, these are questions the episode doesn't want you to think about. The episode wants you to think about how Book has a personal connection. And that's why him and Michael need to go on their own. Because not only does he have a personal connection, but him and Michael have a connection to Mole and Locke because they are the people they used to be. They're not so different, you and I. They have that line said. He says, we're not so different. And it just made me think of Austin Powers.
But then again, you've always needed me, haven't you, Mr. Powers? Remember when I told you we're not so different, you and I?
Maybe we're not so different. Me and her. Us and them.
See? I did say that. Very clever.
Is there a limit to empathy for you?
In what parameters? Like, are you just talking about, like, with me engaging with fictional texts or real people or both?
Any of it, because Discovery very much pushes that there should be no cutoff point for empathy. You should always empathize, whether it be with an abusive father who left you behind and you're miserable for the rest of your life, or literally a genocidal dictator who has killed entire species. There is no limit to empathy. Do you believe that?
No. No, I don't. I believe that there is an upper limit of empathy because there is only so much of yourself that you can give to comprehending things from another person's perspective at one time.
I would love to think that empathy is easy and that I could say, given the circumstances, I could find it for certain people. But to be real, I don't. Especially with characters like the ones in Discovery, I don't feel any empathy or sympathy or anything positive towards Georgiou, for instance, because she's crossed a certain moral threshold that I cannot abide by. And then there is, in this episode, I bring it up because Book is trying to get through to Mole about her father. And she very, 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 very clearly lays out what her issue with her father is and why she has become the person she has now. And it's a classic, like, daddy issues thing, but this is one of the rare times in which Discovery has written something so comprehensively that I am actually moved, because she goes through this story and the performer, she does a great job acting it.
Yep.
I can't help but agree with her. I go, yeah, fuck Cleveland Booker. Fuck that guy. He's a piece of shit. And then for the rest of the episode, she is supposed to not think that way because Cleveland Booker, the one that we know, had a good time with that guy. And it's sad. This is the thing. They actually did such an expert job of writing her reasonings that it actually ruins the rest of the episode, because I can never be on side with Book because I don't have that empathy. I don't have that parameters because everything she laid out was fucking awful. And Book's justifications for why her dad was actually all right and that, like, there's more layers to people became despicable because it became this roundabout way of him being like, look, all of those bad things he did to you benefited me. Isn't that good?
Yeah, you had a real problem with that, where I was a little bit more understandable of being like, well, yeah, he is kind of right that, you know, one person's experience with an individual can be very different than another person's. But I got annoyed that Book was just like, but my experience matters more. My experience is more true than yours.
He has nothing to offer her that is new insights, but she has offered him so much that is new insight on the man he knew, and yet he has remained unaffected by it. It doesn't move him at all. It doesn't change his opinion.
His mentor either.
Because Book used to be what? A criminal rogue who went about the place shooting first, asking questions later.
But saving animals.
But that's it. He had a noble heart underneath it all because he saved the animals. But he was scum. Book at one time was scum. And that's fine. I think that's good. But a part of that was because of her dad. Her dad taught him how to be a criminal man, a courier, an expert of the sleaze.
Yep.
She doesn't need to get over it.
No. It's weirdly exhausting trying to talk about Discovery. Like, we have these things going on that could be interesting and just are not, right? It's not interesting that, you know, Mole and Locke are mirrors for Burnham and Book. It isn't interesting that we're saying goodbye to Owo and Detmer, and that we didn't even get to see them on screen in the episode where they leave the show. And I just don't feel anything about it because it's just so bland and meaningless.
But they have the tools to make it better. They have all of the ingredients.
They
have
have
the pieces.
resources.
We go to the flashbacks of Mole and Locke, and Mole and Locke, it falls apart because their flashback, we already have discussed it, it's nothing but dialogue telling us. They don't have any authenticity. They don't have any chemistry, which is a shame because in every other episode, in every other moment, these two performers are bringing the chemistry, and they've had good lines of dialogue that have been much more revealing, like in the first episode about do you want the pebble or the whole mountain? I know that it's a failure because what people talk about more is not their relationship, but that he is Breen, and Breen, a Deep Space Nine alien that we never saw the face of, and people like the Breen because they got a cool helmet.
Yeah.
And people are so upset about this is what a Breen looks like. They have translucent heads and then they make them solid. Breen. This is what a Breen looks like. That no one actually talks about what that was in aid of.
But I'm disconnected from all of that. I don't see that. I don't engage with that. So the fact that he's Breen and it connects to a show that I have not watched all the way through and is ongoing discussions in communities that I don't actively engage with.
I don't care either. I've never cared about the Breen. They're just an alien race. They're just one of many that I go, oh yeah, they're kind of cool looking. That's it. I have no opinion on them. So him being Breen, this is what they look like. I don't give a fuck about it either. What I give a fuck about is the fact that
Hugh, you give a fuck about Hugh?
Well, Rachel, I know you're activating the Hugh dial. I hear it right now. But just to finish the statement, I don't give a fuck about how Locke is this fallen noble who is a pansy and falls in love with a woman that he meets in the docking bay all of the time. Like, do they not have any other locations they could have had them in? They're always there. And it's just such a sadness. It's such a sadness.
It's such a sadness.
Now, we are here to talk about Dr. Hugh Culber. Rachel.
Two scenes.
Two-scene wonder. Dr. Hugh
Two scenes.
Culber.
We get one in sickbay where he's actually doing his job of being a doctor and then gets interrupted.
Whoa. Hold on there. What was he doing? You say he's doing his job as a doctor. I want specifics. What does that actually mean for Hugh Culber? Because he's a doctor that doesn't do a lot of doctoring in the show, so I actually want to know what you think he did.
He was
I'm looking through my notes.
pointing a thing at the guy's head.
Which guy?
Oh, the patient.
Which patient?
Nameless patient. And then they had to move him from the bed so that Tilly could get to the conduit.
I have in my notes for Hugh's entrance. Hugh is here in the sick bay doing nothing. He is there.
He's holding something in his hand.
Yeah, but he's not really doing anything, is he?
I
just want to be pedantic in this way because when you say like Hugh's here doing his job, it makes it sound like he's doing something, but in fact he's just in medbay. That's it. He's there so
he's in
Tilly,
medbay in front of another person.
So Tilly can say,
"Excuse me.
Can I get to this thing?
Hey, are you taking care of yourself? If you need to talk to somebody, I'll be here." And then end of the episode, during the wrap-up, walks up to Tilly at the bar, and she's super excited at the prospect of him taking her up on the offer. And then he spiels about a bunch of stuff that we're like, well, that did happen, and I guess you would feel things about that, but how come you don't recognize this is you having a crisis of spirituality? Because spirituality is different than religion, and you know that.
Because he himself is not a spiritual person. He's a man of science. I want to rewind a second back to that first scene. She says this line of dialogue that is so ear-achingly atrocious, which is she has this whole little back and forth like, are you fine? He says, I'm fine, but he's clearly not. Because, you know, he says, I'm fine, but in a tone that's so overwrought that it's clear as crystal that he's not. But she says, well, you know, you look after everyone else, but who's looking after you? She says a line like that, and I find it so insulting because you don't need to say it out loud. You just said what the story is. That's not actually doing it. Like, you do that. You do he looks after everyone else, but who's looking after him? You do that don't just say it. Don't just say it out loud. And that's a substitution because what it is, two scenes. Beginning, end. No middle. Because that line of dialogue was the middle.
Yeah. I don't have anything to add to that at the moment. I think that's... Do you?
Well,
or is
yes,
that the
of
end
course.
of the Huda?
No. How could you overlook that this conversation is going to be...
the basis of his entire journey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The conversation he has when he's at the bar, that is, yes. Because
But beyond that being a ridiculous thing that has happened, and we will continue to deal with the consequences of that. Anything else?
Rachel, you love Hugh, and yet you want to rush through the Huda because there should be something else here, but they don't do the legwork.
There's nothing in this episode.
They refer back
talking for probably a fucking hour about how there's nothing on this level, there's nothing on that level, there's nothing on this level, there's nothing on that level. If we look at it from this angle, oh, what? Look, there's nothing!
Exactly.
It's a yum, and I want to be done.
Yum.
I obviously give this a yum.
Yum.
So next week on Yum Yum Pod, we will be discussing Whistle Speak. The one plot of this series that I remembered. It's the Prime Directive plot. Captain Burnham must consider breaking the Prime Directive when a local tradition in a pre-warp society threatens Tilly's life. Culber tries to connect with Stamets, and Adira steps up when Rayner assigns them a position on the bridge.
I remember that plot. Well, plots are...
You can find us on various social medias under
Wow.
Yum Yum Pod or Yum Yum Podcast.
Wow!
If you want to see us suffer through watching these episodes, you can find that and much more bonus content at our Patreon, which is also linked below. If you want to email us, direct that to yumyumpod@gmail.com.
I think you reach your
fucking done, and I want to go to bed.
You reach your breaking point when you're alone with me much more than when we have guests.
You're my safe place, honey. Sorry.
I'm the safe place for you to break, or am I the thing that breaks you more?
You're a safe place for me to break.
Oh, nice. When we have guests, you have to quietly break in the corner. You don't want Julio to judge you for not thinking this was the greatest season of Discovery. Now, we don't have any guests to bounce this off of, but who should have said yum yum in this episode? When should they have done it?
Mole in the flashback.
When? What point do you think?
When she saw his face for the first time.
Oh, you and I are on the same page, but we're on a different line because I thought it should have been Locke when he takes off his helmet and that's the first thing he says when he has his big gummy bear head look at her. He should have just said, yum yum.